Well, hello there, and welcome to 9.1 and 9.2 of the Soul Adventure Spiritual Direction Apprenticeship. And I'm offering this month, September, a little talk on finance in spiritual direction practice. We're getting to the place now. You've been in your practicum. We've been talking about some practical matters. We've talked about touch. We've talked about contemplative moments and other things. And now we're into this discussion on finance. Finance wasn't something that was included in my own training. There was sort of a nod to, well, figure it out. But the fact that I think spiritual direction in the Christian context was nurtured for so many years in monasteries meant that finance really wasn't an issue. It was sort of taken care of. It was a matter of, well, we're being subsidized in this monastery. And then, of course, in time, it has become something that people think about. I want to start by saying that this has not always been the most comfortable topic for me. When I began, I was good at offering the spiritual side of things, but I never quite knew how to handle people who didn't pay or didn't pay on time. I wasn't even sure how much to talk about it and when. I wasn't really good at knowing how to insert this part of the discussion into the mix. And yet, in my retirement, I found myself trying to pay off what was, in those days, to me, was a fairly expensive outlay in order to train myself as a spiritual director. So let's think today about finance, okay? One of the things that I think I did wrong right in the beginning was I just hemmed and hawed when people tried to say, well, how much? Many of our people are used to how much questions. I mean, they deal with them in all different aspects of life. And I would say that most of the people I see in spiritual direction have been or are seeing therapists. And the how much question is a big part of the initial discussion in those relationships. Finally, I came to think of it as a range. And this is where I still am, that the how much is really a range of what is given in the Indianapolis area. So I think at the present time, this is roughly between $50 and $75 a session. And so I tell people that, I don't have a fixed amount. It's up to you to decide, given what you can afford, but that I prefer it be somewhere in the range of what is usually charged here in Indianapolis. And that's $50, $75 at this time in 2024. I have never felt that anyone tried to stiff me or not do the best they could. And so that is there. One thing I didn't do well was think about the word I used for the fee. And so I would call it by a euphemism. I'd say, well, it's just a contribution to Soul Adventure Spiritual Direction. But really, at the end of the day, it is a fee and it is a charge. I felt additionally uncomfortable about issues related to non-payment. I've never actually known someone, like I said, who tried to stiff me or who tried not to pay up for a session. But I have known people that just the way they handle their finances, credit cards, you pay what you can when you want, and sometimes you forget, okay. But I've tried to assert that really my preference is that we always keep our fees, which is what I call it, basically a fee or a remittance, up to date so that they don't accumulate. But what happens when someone forgets? So I've shifted into the idea of end of month invoices, and I try not to actually even send an invoice unless a person is working for an institution, a parish or an organization, a school that is paying for the session. And what I really try to do is just send what I call a gentle reminder that at the end of the month, we're at the end of the month, and hey, you know what? People forget to pay, and that's fine. But can we kind of settle up now that we're at the 28th? And if there's some circumstance that really is compelling, let me know, and we'll work together on that. As a matter of fact, some people have had circumstances that are compelling: loss of job, a divorce, decreased salary, some sudden emergency, health or otherwise. And so in those cases, I'm always ready to say, well, we could do a sliding scale. What I don't think is a wise idea is just to say, well, don't pay me anything. I think there needs to be an exchange, and even if it's $10 or $8 for a session, but that people actually come up with some amount for every session. And the reason is that it becomes too easy to just let it go, and pretty soon you find yourself doing a lot of work in spiritual direction, and people knowing that you don't care that much. What is it that's going on when we ask for these funds? You give it all you have in your session. You do your best to listen carefully. It's not easy work, it's hard work. And over a period of time, you try to accompany people in their spiritual journey. And all of this is really a serious professional endeavor. And so what's going on is that the person who provides the spiritual direction feels honored and supported, and the person that is the client also feels as though by paying they can expect the very best. They can expect good practices from the spiritual director, just like you would expect from anybody else in any other profession, teaching or medical or other aspects of the church or our society and economy. Now, if you have a smaller practice, which is probable in the beginning for people, you might not need any help in terms of your memory, but my practice is larger, and I found that even though there's a little bit of a loss in terms of processing fees, that having people pay with PayPal or even with a Square credit card is really a good idea, because you get a record that's kept for you of all the people who paid and when. I like that better than checks, even though they're easy to deal with nowadays digitally. but I especially like PayPal, and I have a Square card reader, which is just available and not so expensive, and people that like to use their cards often ask for me to swipe their card on the Square reader. But in both cases, both Square or PayPal, you get end of the year summaries of the amount that's come in, and you can actually track your finances. If that's the kind of person you are, or you enjoy doing, you can track your finances at the end of the year, even for taxes. So those are some things to consider when you start thinking about your financial situation, the mechanics, the logistics, a credit card reader or a PayPal account, the terminology. Are you going to call it a fee? Or are you going to what are you going to call it? Hopefully you won't call it a contribution. You need to think about your reminder mechanisms. Do you know how to send out an invoice in case that becomes necessary? But the important thing, I think, is to establish that there is an expectation of payment right from the get-go, right in the very beginning, and you'll see that people will be glad to do it. If you have people that have stuck with you, for example, I have a number for more than 5 or 6 years, they keep coming back because there is something of value that they are receiving in the spiritual direction setting. Another reason, and I just want to call your attention to this as you maybe start thinking of little business plans, is there are a lot of expenses related to spiritual direction. There's the matter of liability insurance. I've never known of a case in which a person needed liability insurance in spiritual direction, but we live in a kind of litigious society, and it's really a good idea to have it. And you can get it really at great price from Spiritual Directors International as part of a package that mostly therapists use. But anyway, that's one thing that you would want to think about. There's your memberships. There might be Spiritual Directors International itself. There might be continuing ed events. There might be materials that you want to buy to use with your clients. You might have some continuing ed aspirations that you'd like to realize. So all of this costs money, and even if you have a little card in the back of your wallet or in your purse, that costs money also to produce. So this is just to say that finance is not a side issue. Finance actually is at the core of what spiritual directors do. And I hope that by bringing this conversation out into the open and having it, that this will make possible a better plan as you move into your spiritual direction practice. Thanks for hanging with me. This was like 14 minutes, and I appreciate the fact that you've given me this time, and I wish you well as you continue to prepare yourself for the sacred ministry of spiritual direction.